A private DNS zone provides name resolution services within virtual network. Private DNS zone is accessible only from the virtual network that it is linked to. Is accessible only from where that is and cannot be accessed over internet. For example, you can create private DNS zone name contoso.com and then create a DNS record like .com in this zone. You can then link the zone to one or more virtual network. Hmm. Select the subscription to manage. Step 2. Identify virtual networks. Let's assume that your organization has already created your VMs and virtual networks in production environment. Okay. Let's assume your organization has already created your VMs and virtual networks in a production environment. Created your VMs and virtual networks in a production and identify the virtual network associated with the VMs that okay, let's assume that your organization has already created your VMs and virtual networks in production environment. Identify the virtual network associated with VMs that need name resolution support. Identify the virtual networks associated with VMs that need the name resolution support. To link the virtual networks to the private zone, you need the virtual network names. Virtual networks to private zone, you need the virtual network names. Okay, so link your virtual networks to a private DNS zone. To link the private DNS zone to a virtual network, you create a virtual network link. In the Azure portal, go to the private zone and then select virtual network links. Uh, Select add to pick the virtual network you want to link to the private zone. Select add to pick the virtual network you want to link to the private zone. You add a virtual network link record for each virtual network that needs private name resolution support. How to create a public DNS zone. Create a DNS zone using an A record by using create a DNS zone and an A record by using Azure DNS. Okay. In the previous unit, we described setting up and configuring the wide world imports.com domain to point to your Azure hosting on Azure DNS. In this unit, you will set up an Azure DNS and create a public DNS zone. Create an A record, verify that A record resolves to an IP address. Sounds interesting. Create a DNS zone in Azure DNS. Before you can host the wide world imports.com domain on your servers, you need to create a DNS zone. The DNS zone holds all the configuration record associated with your domain. To create a DNS zone, sign into Azure portal with the account you used to activate the sandbox. On the home page under Azure Services, create resource pane occurs, search services and marketplace, search for DNS zone by Microsoft. The DNS zone pane occurs. Create a resource, then DNS. Search for and select DNS zone. By Microsoft, the DNS zone pane appears. Select create. The create DNS zone appears. Create DNS zone pane appears. On the basics tab, enter the following values for each setting. Project details, subscription, concierge subscription, resource group, From the drop down, select learn 46F instance detail name. The name needs to be unique in the sandbox. Use where you replace X with letters or numbers. Okay. Letters or numbers. Select review and create. Name must needs to be unique in the sandbox. Okay. After validation process, select create. It will take a few minutes to create the DNS zone. When the deployment is complete, select go to resource. Your DNS zone pane appears. Okay. By default, the NS and SOA record sets are automatically created and automatically deleted whenever a DNS zone is created or deleted. The NS record set defines the Azure DNS namespaces and contain the four Azure DNS records. You use all four records when you update the registrar. The SOA record represents your domain and is used when other DNS servers are searching for your domain. Okay, so the NS and SOA records. Hmm. Represents your domain and is used when other DNS servers are searching for your domain. Make a note of the NS record values. You need them in the next section. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Create a DNS record. Now the DNS zone exists. You need to create the DNS. Now that the DNS zone exists, you need to create the necessary records to support the domain. The primary record set is the primary record set to create is the A record. The A record set is used to point traffic from a logical domain name to the hosting server's IP address. An A record can have multiple records. In a record set, the domain name remains constant while the IP address differs. On the DNS zone pane for wide word imports, in the top menu bar, select record set. The hmm, the add record set pane appears. Enter the following values in each setting. Type A, name www, the host name that you want to resolve to an IP address. Alias record set, no, no. Time to lead 1, unit hours. Time to live, which is specified the period of time DNS server caches the resolution before it's purged. TTL unit hours. This value can be seconds, minutes, hours, days, or weeks. Here you are selecting hours. IP address. IP address. The IP address the record name resolves to. In real world scenario, you would enter the IP address, public IP address of your web server. Okay. Select OK to add the record to your zone. And there you go, www record. Note that it's possible to have more than one IP address set up for your web server. In that case, you add all the associated IP address as records in the A record set. After it's created, you can update the record set with additional IP addresses. Note that it's possible to have more than one IP address set up for your web server. In that case, you add all the associated IP addresses as records in the A record set. After it's created, you can update the record set with additional IP addresses. Verify your global Azure DNS. In real world scenario, after you create the public DNS zone, you update the NS records of the domain name registrar to delegate the domain to Azure. Even though we don't have a registered domain, it's still possible to verify that the DNS zone works as expected by using NSLookup tool. Use the NSLookup to verify the configuration. Here's how you use NSLookup to verify the DNS zone configuration. Use Cloud Shell to run the following command. Replace the DNS zone name with the zone you created. Replace the name server address with the one of the name server one of the NS values you copied after you created the DNS zone. Okay, so my website is, and the name server address I will choose the .com. The following command should look something like this. You should see that your host name www resolves to 10.10.10. You have successfully set up a DNS zone and created an A record. Next, you dynamically resolve resource name by using alias record.